Imagine learning Chinese. Trying to memorize thousands and thousands of characters seems like an impossible task. The question of exactly how many there are is a difficult one to answer. One source I found cites a dictionary that contains 106,230 different characters. However, much like with words in English, you only need to learn the most common ones in order to know most of the language. Then you can figure out the rest from context. For instance, in order to understand 98% of written Chinese, you only need to memorize about 2,500 of these characters, which is still a lot, but a lot more manageable than over 100,000. So, how do Chinese characters work? Chinese uses a writing system known as a logography. This is a writing system where each word is represented by a unique symbol. The idea is usually to represent each word with something that looks like that word. For instance, to write the word cat, you would draw a cat. Other examples of logographies include Egyptian and Mayan hieroglyphics. Chinese isn't a perfect logography since there are words that consist of multiple characters. To briefly summarize how these characters came to be, there is a set of basic characters, or radicals. Then these radicals are combined in various ways for various reasons to create new characters. The exact ways they're combined differ wildly. Over time, the language was written using different materials, causing the characters to change and morph slightly each time. Here, I am going to introduce a few different types of Chinese characters, or hanzi. I will be looking at a classification system called liu shu, or 6 writings. This classification method splits the characters into 6 categories. For this video, I will only be covering 5 of them, since I can't figure out what the 6th one is. First, we have xiang xing zi and zhi shi zi. The most basic Chinese characters are called radicals. They're like the building blocks of Chinese characters. Some radicals are pictographic representations of things in the real world. Things like a person, a female, a tree, and a horse. These are examples of xiang xing zi. Some other radicals represent simpler and more abstract concepts. Things like the number 1, or up and down. These would be examples of zhi shi zi. The next type of character I will be talking about is hui yi zi. Since we now have a few simple characters, one thing we can do is combine 2 of them and create a new idea. Take a look at this character, for example. It means rest. It consists of 2 components, a person and a tree. Note how the radical for person looks slightly different in these 2 instances. We'll talk about that more later in the video. The idea behind this character is that the person is resting by the tree. After that, we have xing sheng zi. By far, this is the most common kind of character. The idea here is that you take one component that represents what the word means, and you take another component that sounds similar to the word. For example, take the character for mother, which is ma in Mandarin Chinese. It consists of the radicals for woman and the radical for horse, which is ma. Some of these characters were established a long time ago, and since language changes, it's not always a guarantee that the phonetic character is going to sound like the current form of the word. Finally, we have jia jie zi. These are characters that are used to represent one thing, but now represent something different that sounds similar. This usually happens when there's no clear way to represent an idea without writing down a similar sounding word. Over time, the alternative way of writing down the concept becomes the standard. Many Chinese characters for numbers fall into this category. Now that I've introduced some ways that these characters are combined to create new characters, I would like to talk about how they used to look and how they've changed over time. Chinese used to be written on an oracle bone script. Then the writing medium changed over time, causing the characters to change as well. Here are a few examples of different radicals and how they've evolved through different scripts. As you can see, in early stages, these characters looked more like the things they represent. And as time went on, they got simpler and easier to write. Remember earlier how the radical for person looked different when it was beside another character? Let's talk a bit more about that. The Oracle Bone version of the person radical bears more resemblance to its modern counterpart than, for instance, the horse example. We can see how the character evolved in isolation in this image. When next to another character, it made more sense to keep one leg longer than the other, and to have the remaining components connect in one stroke. What I find so fascinating about this writing system is that people still use it today. Egyptian hieroglyphics, for example, operated on very much the same principles, but have since fallen out of use. People in China use this writing system every day. It's something that unites all the Chinese languages. A person who knows Mandarin won't be able to understand someone speaking Cantonese, but they can write down their thoughts and be able to understand each other perfectly. Well, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. In the description, I have some sources that I used, as well as a link to an article about the challenges of implementing this writing system onto a digital environment so that you can actually type in Chinese. It's really interesting. I haven't read the whole thing, but I'm sure if you're into that sort of stuff, you'd love to learn about it. But yeah, that was it. I had fun making this video. Yeah. I will see you around. Bye.